I never imagined I would become a guest in my own home. Standing in the hallway with my suitcase at my feet, staring at the closed door of what had been my bedroom for 32 years, I felt the ground shift beneath me in a way that had nothing to do with my recent hip surgery. The brass nameplate that had always been blank now bore new lettering in an ornate script. Vanessa and Derek's suite. My son's new wife had wasted no time making her claim. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started ordinarily enough, or as ordinary as anything could be in the 3 weeks since I'd returned from the rehabilitation center. Derek had picked me up himself, his face creased with what I'd interpreted as concern but now recognized might have been something closer to guilt. The drive from St. Mary's Rehabilitation Hospital to our family home in Riverside had been unusually quiet. My son, normally chatty and attentive, had seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly at red lights. Our house, a sprawling Victorian that my late husband Vincent and I had purchased as a fixer-upper 40 years ago, sat on 2 acres of carefully maintained gardens. Vincent had died 6 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving me alone in the big house with too many rooms and too many memories. Derek had been my anchor through that grief, calling daily, visiting twice a week, making sure I wasn't drowning in loneliness. Then, 8 months ago, he'd met Vanessa Chen at a medical conference in Seattle. Derek was a successful orthopedic surgeon, well-respected in his field, and Vanessa was a pharmaceutical sales representative, beautiful and ambitious with a smile that never quite reached her calculating eyes. I tried to be welcoming when he first introduced us, tried to ignore the way she assessed everything in my home with an appraiser's gaze, the way she touched Derek's arm possessively whenever I spoke to him. They'd married in a rushed ceremony just 4 months after meeting. I'd been excluded from the planning, informed only 2 weeks before the event that they'd decided on an intimate destination wedding in Cancun. My hip had been bothering me even then, making travel difficult, but I'd managed to attend, watching from a resort chair as my only child pledged his life to a woman who'd barely bothered to learn my first name. She called me Mrs. Harrison exclusively, never Margaret, never Mom, always maintaining that professional distance that felt more like a barrier than politeness. The hip replacement surgery had been scheduled for late September. Derek had insisted I not worry about anything, that he and Vanessa would handle all the arrangements for my recovery period. I'd been touched by his concern, grateful that I wouldn't be alone during the difficult healing process. What I hadn't understood was that his solution involved moving Vanessa into my house, and apparently into my bedroom. When we pulled up to the house that morning, Vanessa's silver Mercedes was already parked in the circular driveway, taking up the spot where Vincent used to park his beloved Buick. She emerged from the front door as Derek helped me from the car, her yoga outfit pristine and expensive, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Margaret," she'd said, not bothering with any warmer greeting, "we've made some changes while you were away. For your comfort, of course. We thought it would be easier if you took the downstairs guest room. The stairs are so difficult with your new hip." I'd stared at her, not quite comprehending. The downstairs guest room was small, barely large enough for a double bed and a dresser. It had been Vincent's home office before his death, and I'd converted it into a space for overnight guests who couldn't manage the stairs. It had a lovely view of the garden, but it was cramped with a tiny attached bathroom that had only a shower stall, no tub. "That's very thoughtful," I'd managed to say, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "But I'd like to see my own room first. Get a few things." Vanessa's smile had frozen in place. "Actually, Derek and I have moved into the master suite. It makes more sense, really, given that we're the ones caring for you. We need our privacy, and that room has so much more space. We've already moved all your essentials downstairs." The casual way she said it, as if she were discussing a minor furniture rearrangement rather than displacing me from the room where I'd slept beside my husband for decades, where I'd nursed him through his final illness, where I'd cried myself to sleep for months after his death, made my blood run cold. I'd looked at Derek, waiting for him to contradict her, to tell me this was some kind of misunderstanding. Instead, he'd avoided my eyes. "Mom, it really is better this way. The downstairs room has everything you need, and you won't have to worry about the stairs during recovery. We can move you back up once you're fully healed." "But that was my room," I'd said, hating how my voice cracked. Your father and I chose every piece of furniture in there together. His clothes are still in the closet. I'm not ready to just abandon it. We've boxed up Dad's things, Derek had replied, still not meeting my gaze. They're in the attic. We can go through them together when you're feeling stronger. This is just temporary, Mom. Just until you're back on your feet. Vanessa had already been walking back toward the house, her posture radiating satisfaction. Derek had helped me inside, practically carrying me as I struggled to process what was happening. The downstairs guest room had indeed been prepared for me. My clothes hung in the small closet, my toiletries arranged on the bathroom counter, even my favorite reading lamp perched on the nightstand. But nothing could disguise the fact that I'd been demoted in my own home, pushed aside to accommodate my son's new wife. That had been 3 days ago. In those 72 hours, I'd barely seen Derek. He left early for the hospital and came home late, always with an apologetic kiss on my forehead and excuses about complicated surgeries and demanding patience. Vanessa, meanwhile, had taken over the house with the efficiency of an invading army. She'd rearranged the kitchen, replacing my familiar organization system with her own logic. She'd hired a cleaning service that came daily, filling the house with strangers who moved my things without asking. She'd even changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me, leaving me unable to check my email or video chat with my sister in Portland. But the bedroom situation gnawed at me constantly. I kept thinking about the papers hidden beneath my mattress upstairs, documents I placed there years ago and never moved. Important papers that Vanessa would eventually find if she decided to rotate the mattress or buy new bedding. Papers that contained information my daughter-in-law definitely should not have access to. On the 4th morning of my captivity, that's how I'd begun to think of it. I woke before dawn, my hip aching despite the pain medication. The house was silent, that deep quiet that comes in the hours before sunrise. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. I needed to get into that bedroom. I needed to retrieve those papers before Vanessa found them. The physical therapist had been clear about my limitations. No stairs for at least 6 weeks, she'd said firmly. Your hip needs time to heal properly. But the therapist didn't understand what was at stake. She didn't know about the manila envelope, thick with documents, that held secrets I'd kept for 40 years. Secrets that would devastate Derek if they came out the wrong way. Secrets that someone like Vanessa would weaponize without hesitation. I waited until I heard Derek's car pull out of the driveway at 6:30, right on schedule. Vanessa's routine was predictable too. She attended a yoga class every morning at 7, followed by a green juice at the overpriced smoothie bar downtown, usually returning around 9. That gave me a window. A small, painful window, but a window nonetheless. Moving quietly despite my walker, I made my way to the front hallway. The stairs loomed before me like a mountain. 16 steps to the landing, then another 12 to the second floor. I'd climbed them thousands of times without thinking. Now they represented a challenge that could set back my recovery by weeks, or worse. But the alternative was allowing Vanessa to find those papers first. I couldn't let that happen. Too much was riding on keeping certain truths buried, at least until I could figure out how to handle them properly. I gripped the banister with my right hand, positioned my walker awkwardly with my left, and began the ascent. Each step sent shooting pains through my hip, despite the medication I'd taken earlier. My physical therapist would have been horrified. Derek would have been furious. But I pushed forward, focusing on the goal rather than the pain. By the time I reached the landing, sweat was pouring down my face and my breath came in ragged gasps. I paused, leaning heavily on the walker, giving my body a moment to adjust. Only 12 more steps. I could do this. I had to do this. The second flight was worse. My hip screamed in protest with each movement, and twice I nearly lost my balance, catching myself at the last second with a grip on the banister that left my knuckles white. But finally, mercifully, I reached the second floor hallway. My bedroom, no Derek and Vanessa's bedroom now, was at the end of the hall, its door closed but not locked. I shuffled down the corridor, my walker thumping softly on the hardwood floors. When I reached the door, I paused, listening for any sound that might indicate Vanessa had changed her routine. Silence. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was almost unrecognizable. Everything Vincent and I had chosen together, the sage green walls I'd painted myself, The antique dresser we'd found at an estate sale, the wedding quilt my grandmother had made us, all of it was gone. In its place was a sterile showroom aesthetic, all white and chrome and glass. The bed was new, some modern platform thing that looked like it belonged in a hotel. Abstract art I didn't recognize hung where our family photos had been. But the location of the bed was the same. It sat in the exact spot where our bed had always been, and unless Vanessa had replaced the mattress itself, my envelope should still be there. I moved as quickly as my hip would allow, reaching the side of the bed. Getting down to check beneath the mattress would be the real challenge. I couldn't kneel and bending was difficult. Using the walker for support, I lowered myself to sit on the edge of the bed, then carefully leaned to the side, reaching my hand into the gap between the mattress and box spring. My fingers brushed fabric, then something papery.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The envelope. Relief flooded through me. She hadn't found it yet. I pulled carefully, working the thick envelope free from its hiding place. It was exactly as I'd left it, the seal still intact, my handwriting on the front faded but legible, for Derek to be opened only upon my death or at my discretion. I was tucking the envelope into the large pocket of my robe when I heard it. The distinctive purr of Vanessa's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. My heart lurched. She was back early. I checked my watch, only 7:15. She must have skipped yoga. Panic seized me. There was no way I could make it down the stairs before she came inside. My climb up had taken nearly 15 minutes, and going down would be even more treacherous. I was trapped. I heard the front door open, then Vanessa's voice calling out, "Margaret, are you up?" Her tone was sharp, suspicious. She must have noticed something amiss. Her footsteps sounded on the stairs, quick and light. She was coming up. In a moment of desperation, I looked around the transformed room for somewhere to hide, anywhere that might give me time to think. But there was nowhere. The room was too open, too minimalist. The footsteps reached the landing. I clutched the envelope to my chest, my mind racing through possible explanations, none of them good. The bedroom door swung open, and Vanessa stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to cold anger in an instant. "What are you doing in here?" Her voice was ice. "You're not supposed to be upstairs. You could have fallen. You could have hurt yourself." "I needed something," I said, hearing the tremor in my voice and hating it. "Something personal." Her eyes dropped to the envelope in my hands, and I saw the calculation there, the predatory interest. "What's that?" "Nothing that concerns you," I replied, trying to inject some firmness into my tone. "Just old papers. Personal documents." She moved into the room, closing the door behind her. When she spoke again, her voice had taken on a dangerous softness. "You're in my bedroom going through things, hiding things from me. I think I have a right to know what you're concealing, Margaret. Especially since you're living under our care in our home." Our home. The words hit me like a slap. This was my home. Vincent and I had made every mortgage payment. We'd raised Derek here. We'd built a life here. And now this woman, who'd known my son for less than a year, was claiming ownership. "This is my house," I said quietly, meeting her gaze. "My name is on the deed. Vincent left it to me." Something flickered across Vanessa's face, a micro-expression I couldn't quite read. "For now," she said simply. "But things change, don't they? Circumstances evolve. And Derek is very concerned about your ability to maintain this property, especially after your surgery. He's been talking about how hard it must be for you, managing such a large house alone." The implication was clear as crystal. She wanted me out. She wanted this house, and she was working on Derek to make it happen. The envelope in my hand suddenly felt heavier, more crucial, because the documents inside weren't just any old papers. They were insurance. Protection I'd hoped never to need, but had been wise enough to secure decades ago. "I think we should go downstairs," Vanessa said, her tone shifting to something falsely sweet. "You've exhausted yourself with this little adventure. Let's get you back to your room before Derek comes home for lunch. We wouldn't want him to know you've been climbing stairs against doctor's orders, would we? That would only worry him more about your judgment." The threat was barely veiled. She would tell Derek I'd been reckless, use it as evidence that I couldn't be trusted to live independently. She was building a case, I realized, collecting ammunition to convince my son that his mother needed to be removed from her own home. As I struggled to stand, using the walker for support, Vanessa moved closer. Her hand reached out, quick as a snake, and grabbed for the envelope. But 40 years of being a mother had given me quick reflexes when it mattered. I twisted away, nearly losing my balance but keeping the envelope out of her reach. "Don't," I said, my voice stronger now. "These papers are not your business, Vanessa. They're private family documents." Her eyes narrowed. "If they're family documents, then Derek has a right to see them. He is your family after all. Your only family. Unless there's something in there you don't want him to know?" She was fishing, I realized, trying to gauge what she was dealing with. The smart thing would be to leave, to get out of this room and back downstairs before this confrontation escalated further. But I was tired, in pain, and suddenly furious at being pushed around in my own house by this stranger who'd married into my family. "What I want," I said carefully, "is to return to my room. What's in this envelope will be revealed when the time is right, and not a moment before. That's not your decision to make." Vanessa's smile was cold. "We'll see about that. Derek trusts me, Margaret. He tells me everything. And lately he's been very worried about you. About your memory, your judgment. He's mentioned power of attorney, making sure someone can make decisions for you if you become incapacitated." My blood ran cold. Power of attorney. If Derek signed over power of attorney to Vanessa, she would have access to everything. My bank accounts, my property, my personal documents. She could force me out of my own home legally. She could control my entire life. "I need to go downstairs now," I said, moving toward the door. Vanessa didn't stop me, but her smile suggested she thought she'd won this round. As I shuffled past her, envelope still clutched tightly, she spoke one more time. "You can't hide forever, Margaret. Whatever secrets you're keeping, they'll come out eventually. They always do. And when they do, Derek will need someone he can trust to help him through it. Someone who has his best interests at heart. Someone like me, not someone who's been lying to him for God knows how long." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't give her more ammunition. Instead, I focused on the immediate challenge of getting down the stairs without falling and breaking something in addition to my already damaged hip. The descent was agony. Each step jarred my healing joint, sending fresh waves of pain radiating through my body. Vanessa followed at a distance, not helping but watching, probably hoping I'd fall so she could use it as further evidence of my incompetence. But I made it, finally reaching the ground floor and shuffling back to my small converted room. Once inside, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The envelope was still in my hands, slightly crumpled now from my death grip. I moved to the bed and sat down heavily, my entire body trembling from pain and adrenaline. For a long moment I just sat there, staring at the envelope I'd sealed 40 years ago with shaking hands and a heart full of secrets. The handwriting on the front was younger, more confident than my current script. For Derek, to be opened only upon my death or at my discretion. I'd written those words 2 weeks after Vincent died, finally acknowledging truths I'd kept buried for decades. Inside the envelope were 3 documents. The first was a letter several pages long explaining everything. The second was a legal document, properly notarized and witnessed, that would stand up in any court. The third was a photograph, yellowed with age, showing people whose faces would mean nothing to Vanessa but everything to Derek. I'd hidden these papers for 6 years, waiting for the right moment to share them with my son. But the right moment had never seemed to arrive. After Vincent died, Derek had been so devastated that I couldn't bear to complicate his grief with revelations about his father's past. Then he'd thrown himself into his career, working long hours, and our conversations became rushed phone calls and brief weekend visits. And then Vanessa had appeared, and suddenly there was no privacy, no opportunity for the kind of deep conversation these revelations required. Now, with Vanessa circling like a shark who'd scented blood, I realized I was running out of time. She knew I was hiding something. She would push Derek to investigate, to demand answers. And if the truth came out through her discovery rather than my careful revelation, it would be distorted, weaponized, used to drive a wedge between me and my son. I needed a plan. I needed to tell Derek the truth on my own terms, before Vanessa could twist it into something ugly. But I also needed to be smart about it. One wrong move and I could lose everything: my home, my son, my carefully maintained dignity. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I quickly slid the envelope under my pillow just as the door opened. It was Maria, the housekeeper Vanessa had hired, a kind woman in her 50s who'd been unfailingly gentle with me during my recovery. "Mrs. Harrison," she said softly, her accent marking her as originally from somewhere in Central America. "Mrs. Vanessa said you had a difficult morning. She asked me to bring you lunch and your medication." She carried a tray with soup, crackers, and a glass of water, along with the pill organizer that held my various medications. But her eyes held concern that seemed genuine, not the false solicitude Vanessa wore like a mask. "Thank you, Maria," I said, managing a weak smile. "I appreciate your kindness." She set the tray on the small table by the window, then moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Harrison, forgive me for speaking out of turn, but you should be careful. Mrs. Vanessa, she has been asking me questions. About you, about the house, about Mr. Vincent. She wants to know things that are not her business to know." My heart rate picked. "What kind of things?" Maria glanced toward the closed door, clearly nervous. "About Mr. Vincent's family. About money. About documents. She told me to look through your things when I clean, to tell her if I find anything unusual. I have not done this," she added quickly. "It is not right. But I thought you should know." The confirmation that Vanessa was actively searching for whatever she thought I was hiding sent a chill through me. "Thank you for telling me, Maria. I truly appreciate your loyalty." She nodded, then hesitated. "There is something else. I heard Mrs. Vanessa on the phone this morning, before she came back from her class. She was talking to someone about elder care facilities, about how Dr. Derek could have you declared incompetent if necessary, especially after you climbed the stairs against medical advice. So that was Vanessa's plan. Have me declared incompetent, take control of my assets, and ship me off to some facility where I'd be out of her way while she took over my house and my life. The envelope under my pillow suddenly felt like the only weapon I had in a battle I was losing. After Maria left, I picked at the soup, my appetite gone. My hip throbbed, punishment for my morning climb, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the fear gnawing at my insides. I'd been naive, I realized. I thought I could outlast Vanessa, wait her out until Derek came to his senses and saw her for what she was. But she wasn't waiting. She was making moves, building her case, maneuvering to remove me from the equation entirely. I pulled the envelope back out from under the pillow and stared at it. The truth inside could protect me, could show Derek exactly what kind of man his father had been, could provide me with leverage I desperately needed. But it could also shatter my son's entire understanding of his family, his history, his identity. Vincent Harrison had been a good father. Loving, present, devoted to Derek in ways that many fathers weren't. He'd coached Little League, attended every school play, taught Derek to drive with patience and humor. He'd been a good husband too, faithful and kind, providing well for our family through his accounting practice. But Vincent had also kept secrets. Big secrets. Secrets that I'd been complicit in hiding. Secrets that had shaped our entire marriage in ways Derek never understood. The photograph in the envelope showed 3 people standing in front of a house I'd never seen. Vincent, younger and thinner than Derek had ever known him, stood between 2 other people. One was a woman I'd never met, pretty and dark-haired, wearing a dress that dated the photo to the early 1960s. The other was a teenage boy, maybe 14 or 15, who had Vincent's eyes and Derek's chin. Vincent's first family. The wife and son he'd left behind in Ohio when he disappeared one night in 1967, changing his name and starting over in California. The family Derek had no idea existed. I'd learned the truth by accident, 5 years into our marriage. A letter had arrived, addressed to Vincent Morgan, which wasn't the name I'd married. Vincent Harrison had been white-faced when I'd confronted him, certain I would leave, take baby Derek and disappear. Instead, after hearing the full story, I'd made a choice. I'd chosen to keep his secret, to protect the new life he'd built, to preserve our family. Vincent's first marriage had been troubled from the start, he'd told me. His wife Sarah had been unstable, violent when she drank, which was often. The boy, Vincent Jr., had been caught in the middle, and Vincent Sr. had tried for years to make it work, to get Sarah help, to protect his son. But in 1967, After Sarah had attacked him with a kitchen knife during one of her episodes, he'd made a desperate decision. He'd left in the middle of the night, taken money from their joint account and disappeared. He'd felt tremendous guilt about abandoning Vincent Jr., he'd assured me through tears. But he'd been terrified that if he'd tried to fight for custody, Sarah would have destroyed him in court, made him out to be the villain. So he'd reinvented himself and eventually met me. We'd built a good life together, and he'd been a far better father to Derek than he'd managed to be to his first son. The second document in the envelope was a copy of a will, Vincent's first will, executed shortly before he died. In it, he'd left a substantial sum of money, nearly half his estate, to Vincent Morgan Jr., along with a letter explaining everything and apologizing for his abandonment. He'd begged me to execute his wishes after his death, to find his first son and give him the inheritance he deserved. I hadn't done it. I'd told myself it was to protect Derek, to preserve his inheritance, to avoid complicating his grief. But the truth was messier. I'd been angry at Vincent for keeping secrets, for putting me in this position. And I'd been afraid that Vincent Jr. would sue for more, would challenge the will, would destroy the memory of the man Derek had loved. So I'd buried the truth, literally, hiding the documents under the mattress where they'd remained for 6 years. Derek had inherited everything, never knowing his father had wanted to split the estate with a half-brother he'd never met. And I'd lived with the guilt, telling myself I'd find the right time to make it right, knowing deep down I was just looking for excuses to maintain the lie. Now that lie was my only leverage against Vanessa. Because if she tried to have me declared incompetent, if she tried to take my house, I would reveal everything. I would tell Derek about his father's past, about the half-brother he'd never known existed, about the inheritance I'd denied another man. It would devastate him, but it would also show him that his wife wasn't the only one capable of deception. It was mutually assured destruction, and I hated that it had come to this. But Vanessa had forced my hand by threatening everything I had left. As afternoon faded into evening, I heard Derek come home. Vanessa's voice drifted down from upstairs, animated and concerned, no doubt telling him about my reckless stair climbing. I waited, wondering if he would come to check on me, to scold me or comfort me or maybe, hopefully, to talk about what was really happening in this house. When the knock finally came, it was gentle. "Mom?" Derek's voice carried the same tone he'd used when he was small and wasn't sure if I was angry with him. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart." I set aside the book I'd been pretending to read. He entered, and my heart ached at the sight of him. My baby boy, now a grown man of 36. His face creased with concern and something that might have been shame. He pulled up the chair from the small desk and sat down, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that was pure Vincent. "Vanessa told me you went upstairs this morning." He didn't sound angry, just worried and tired. "Mom, you could have seriously hurt yourself." The physical therapist was very clear about the stairs. "I needed something from my room," I said simply. "Something personal and important. But why didn't you just ask? We would have gotten it for you." He paused, then added more quietly, "Vanessa said you were going through things in the bedroom, that you had some kind of envelope you wouldn't explain." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised with such love and care, and made a decision. "Derek, I think it's time we had a serious conversation. About a lot of things. But first, I need you to be honest with me. Are you and Vanessa planning to have me declared incompetent? To take control of my assets?" His face went pale. "What? No, Mom, of course not. Who told you that?" "I have my sources." I kept my voice gentle. "Derek, I know Vanessa wants this house. I know she's been working on you to question my judgment. And I know she's been researching elder care facilities." He was quiet for a long moment, not meeting my eyes. "She's just concerned," he finally said. "She thinks the house is too much for you to manage, especially after your surgery. And maybe she's right. Maybe it would be easier if you moved somewhere smaller, somewhere with medical staff on hand." "Somewhere that isn't here," I said flatly. "Somewhere that leaves this house free for you and Vanessa to move into full-time." "It's not like that," he protested, but the words lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I leaned forward, ignoring the twinge in my hip. "Derek, look at me. Really look at me. Do I seem incompetent to you? Confused? Unable to manage my own affairs?" He finally met my gaze and I saw guilt there mixed with something else. Conflict ion. He was being pulled in two directions between his wife and his mother, and the strain was showing. No, he admitted quietly. You seem exactly like yourself. Sharp, independent, stubborn. But Mom, he added, his voice taking on a pleading quality, Vanessa's trying to help. She wants what's best for all of us. This house is huge. The upkeep costs are enormous. And you've been alone here for 6 years. Maybe it is time to consider downsizing. And what happens to this house if I downsize? I asked. Your father and I bought it together, made every mortgage payment together, raised you here. It holds 40 years of memories. But I suppose Vanessa would be happy to take it off my hands? Derek winced. That's not fair. Fair. I felt my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. Is it fair that I came home from surgery to find myself kicked out of my own bedroom? Is it fair that Vanessa has taken over every aspect of this house without consulting me? Is it fair that she's been asking the housekeeper to spy on me? That's not true, Derek said, but he sounded uncertain. Ask Maria yourself, I challenged. Vanessa has been pumping her for information, asking her to search my things. She's looking for something, Derek. Something she thinks I'm hiding. Are you? The question was direct, his doctor's tone coming through. Are you hiding something, Mom? This was the moment. I could tell him everything right now. Pull out the envelope and watch his world crumble as he learned the truth about his father's past. Or I could hold my cards a little longer. Use the threat of revelation as protection until I figured out a better plan. Yes, I said finally. I am hiding something. Something important. But it's not what you think, and it's not something I'm ready to share yet. When the time is right, I'll tell you everything. But Derek, I need you to trust me. Trust that I have good reasons for my privacy. Trust that I'm not losing my mind or my competence. Can you do that? He was quiet for so long I thought he might refuse. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, but Mom, you have to promise me something in return. No more climbing stairs until the doctor says it's okay. If you need something from upstairs, you tell me and I'll get it for you. Deal. Deal, I agreed, though I had no intention of keeping that promise if necessary. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. I love you, Mom. You know that, right? Whatever happens, whatever Vanessa says or does, you're still my mother. That doesn't change. After he left, I sat in the darkening room, listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. Somewhere above, Vanessa was probably planning her next move, frustrated that her attempts to discover my secrets had been thwarted. But she would keep trying. Women like Vanessa didn't give up when they wanted something, and she wanted this house, wanted control, wanted me out of the picture entirely. The envelope was back under my pillow, its weight a constant reminder of the choice I faced. I could use the truth as a weapon, deploying it to protect myself but destroying Derek in the process. Or I could find another way, some path that didn't require me to shatter my son's image of his father. But as I finally drifted off to sleep that night, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer I could keep the truth buried, and what price I would ultimately pay for trying. The following week brought an uneasy truce. Derek had apparently spoken to Vanessa about backing off, because she maintained a cool distance, treating me with exaggerated politeness that felt more insulting than her previous antagonism. She would ask about my physical therapy appointments with saccharine concern, offer to make me tea I never drank, and smile that cold smile whenever our paths crossed in the hallway. But I knew she hadn't given up. I could feel her watching, waiting for an opening. She'd simply changed tactics, becoming more subtle in her maneuvering. The cleaning service she'd hired came less frequently, but Maria reported that Vanessa was now doing some of the cleaning herself, particularly in areas where my personal belongings were stored. She was still searching, still convinced I was hiding something worth finding. My physical therapy sessions became a refuge. 3 times a week, Derek would drive me to the rehabilitation center where I worked with a patient therapist named Raymond, who focused on rebuilding my strength without judgment or ulterior motives. The exercises were painful, but the pain was honest, unlike the psychological games being played in my own home. It was during one of these sessions, as I struggled through a series of leg lifts, that Raymond mentioned something that caught my attention. You're doing great, Mrs. Harrison, he said encouragingly. At this rate, you'll be fully mobile in another month or so. Back to your normal routine, climbing stairs, tending that garden your son mentioned you love so much. The garden. I'd been so consumed with the bedroom situation and Vanessa's machinations that I'd barely thought about my garden in weeks. Vincent and I had spent years cultivating it, creating a sanctuary of roses, lavender, and ornamental grasses that required constant attention. In the chaos following my surgery, I'd completely neglected it. That afternoon, when Derek dropped me back at the house, I asked him to help me outside. The weather was mild for November, one of those rare Pacific Northwest days when the sun broke through the perpetual gray. He settled me on the patio bench with a concerned expression, making sure I had my phone in case I needed help getting back inside. "I'll just be out here for a bit," I assured him. "The fresh air is good for me, and I want to see what damage has been done to my roses while I've been laid up." After he left for an afternoon surgery, I sat surveying the garden that had once been my pride. It was in worse shape than I'd feared. Weeds had taken over several beds, dead leaves needed clearing, and the roses desperately needed pruning before winter set in properly. The neglect felt like a metaphor for everything else in my life, beautiful things left to decay while I was trapped inside, powerless to tend to what mattered. I was considering how I might manage some light weeding when I heard the back door open. Vanessa emerged, carrying a large garbage bag, and wearing expensive gardening gloves that looked like they'd never touched actual dirt. She seemed surprised to see me. "Margaret," she said, that false brightness in her voice. "I didn't realize you were out here. I was just going to do some garden cleanup. It's gotten so overgrown." "That's my garden," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Vincent and I planted every rose bush, every perennial. I prefer to manage it myself." She set down the garbage bag with exaggerated care. "Of course you would. But in your current condition, that's simply not practical. The garden needs attention now, not whenever you're fully recovered. I'm just trying to help." "I don't need your help with my garden," I said firmly. "I'll hire a professional service if necessary, someone who knows what they're doing." Something flickered across her face, a crack in the pleasant mask. "You know, Margaret, I'm getting tired of this attitude. Everything I do to help is met with suspicion and hostility. I'm trying to take care of this house to make things easier for you and Derek, and all you do is fight me." "Because you're not trying to help me," I replied, my patience finally snapping. "You're trying to replace me. Take over my house, my bedroom, my garden. Push me further and further to the margins until there's nothing left of my life here. Then you can ship me off to some facility with a clear conscience." Her eyes narrowed, the mask dropping completely. "You think you have it all figured out, don't you? Poor Margaret, the victim of her evil daughter-in-law. But let me tell you something. Derek is exhausted from worrying about you. He lies awake at night wondering if you're going to fall and hurt yourself, if you're taking your medications correctly, if you're even capable of living independently anymore. I'm the one who reassures him, who takes care of the practical matters so he can focus on his career. You should be grateful, not paranoid." "Grateful?" The word came out sharp as glass. "You want me to be grateful that you've invaded my home and my life? That you're working to convince my son I'm incompetent?" "I'm not working to convince him of anything," Vanessa snapped. "I'm just not hiding the truth from him like you apparently are." She gestured toward the house. "Whatever you're keeping in that envelope, whatever secrets you're hoarding, they're clearly important enough that you risked your recovery to retrieve them. That tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. Your secrets matter more to you than your own health or your son's peace of mind." "My secrets are none of your concern," I shot back. "They're family matters that have nothing to do with you." "I'm Derek's wife," she said coldly. "That makes me family whether you like it or not. And if you're keeping things from him that could affect his future, his inheritance, his understanding of who he is, then yes, that absolutely concerns me." "So that's what this is really about," I said, understanding crystallizing. "You're worried about inheritance, about what Derek stands to get, and whether I'm planning to leave it to someone else." Her silence was answer enough. I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. "Vanessa, even if I wanted to cut Derek out of my will, which I absolutely do not, this house and everything in it is already partially his. Vincent's life insurance, his retirement accounts, all of that went to Derek years ago. I'm living on my own savings and Social Security. There's no hidden fortune for you to worry about." "Then what's in the envelope?" she demanded, her composure cracking further. "Why all the secrecy if it's not about money?" "Because some truths are complicated," I said quietly. "Because some information needs to be shared carefully, with consideration for how it will affect people. Because I'm Derek's mother, and I get to decide when and how to tell him things about his father's past. Vincent's past? Vanessa's interest sharpened visibly. What about Vincent's past? I'd said too much. Let my anger push me into revealing more than I'd intended. Nothing that changes anything fundamental, I backtracked. Just private family history that Derek deserves to hear from me, not discover through his wife's snooping. Vanessa stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes. Then, without another word, she picked up her garbage bag and went back inside, leaving me alone in the garden with my racing heart and the sinking realization that I'd just made a serious tactical error. That evening, Derek came home earlier than usual. He found me still in the garden, though I'd managed to do some light deadheading of the roses closest to the bench. His face was troubled as he helped me stand. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, and my stomach dropped at his tone. Inside, Vanessa was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa with her hands folded in her lap, the picture of concerned innocence. Derek guided me to a chair, then remained standing, an unconscious power dynamic that put me at a disadvantage. "Vanessa told me about your conversation this afternoon," he began, his voice careful. "She said you admitted there's something about Dad's past that you've been keeping from me. Something important enough that you're hiding documents about it." I shot Vanessa a look of pure fury. She twisted the conversation, of course, made it sound like I'd confessed to some terrible deception rather than simply asserting my right to privacy. She met my gaze with a slight smile that Derek couldn't see from his angle. "Your father had a complicated life before he met me," I said, choosing my words carefully. "There are aspects of his history that he asked me to keep private until after his death. I've been trying to find the right time and way to share that information with you." "What kind of aspects?" Derek asked, his expression growing more concerned. Was he in legal trouble? Financial trouble? Did he have debts or obligations we don't know about? "Nothing like that," I assured him quickly. "Nothing that affects you legally or financially. It's more personal than that. More about who he was as a person, choices he made long before we met." "Then why not just tell me?" Derek's voice carried a note of hurt now. "Why keep secrets at all? I'm not a child anymore, Mom. Whatever it is, I can handle it." "I know you can," I said gently. "But there are other people involved, people who deserve consideration. And your father specifically asked me to handle this discreetly, with care. I'm trying to honor his wishes while also being fair to you." Vanessa spoke up for the first time, her voice dripping with false concern. "Margaret, if there are other people involved, doesn't Derek have a right to know who they are? Especially if they might have claims on the estate or connections to his father that could affect his own identity." "There are no claims on the estate," I said through gritted teeth. "I've already told you that. This is about history, not money." "But it is about identity," Derek said quietly. "Isn't it? About who Dad really was, about parts of his life I never knew about." He sat down heavily on the sofa next to Vanessa, and I hated seeing them united on one side while I sat alone on the other. "Mom, I need you to be honest with me. Did Dad have other children?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. I could lie, could deny it outright, but Derek was smart and persistent. If I denied it now and he discovered the truth later, he'd never trust me again. But if I confirmed it without context, without the full story, Vanessa would twist it into something ugly. "Yes," I said finally, the word feeling like surrender. "Your father had a son from a previous marriage. A marriage that ended long before he met me." Derek's face went white. "I have a brother?" His voice cracked on the word. "I have a brother and you never told me?" "A half-brother," I clarified, as if that distinction mattered. "And your father had very complicated reasons for not being in contact with him. Reasons that don't reflect badly on your father's character, but do require explanation and context to understand properly." "Where is he?" Derek demanded. "This brother I didn't know existed. Is he alive? Does he know about me?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Your father lost contact with him in the late 1960s. I have some information that might help locate him, but I haven't pursued it because your father was very conflicted about whether rekindling that relationship was the right thing to do." "So you've been sitting on this information for 6 years?" Vanessa interjected, her voice sharp with accusation. "Since Vincent died, you've known Derek had a brother out there somewhere, and you just decided not to mention it?" It wasn't that simple, I protested. Vincent left specific instructions. He wanted me to use my judgment about when and how to share this information. I was waiting for the right moment. And when exactly would that be? Derek's voice was rising now, anger breaking through the initial shock. When I was 40, 50? On your deathbed? Mom, this is huge. This isn't just some minor detail about Dad's past. This is my family. My blood relative. How could you keep this from me? Because I was trying to protect you, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. From what? Derek stood abruptly, pacing to the window. From knowing I had family out there? From the possibility of having a relationship with my own brother? What gave you the right to make that decision for me? Your father gave me that right, I said quietly. He trusted me to handle this situation with discretion, to consider all the factors involved. What factors? Vanessa asked, leaning forward. What possible factors could justify keeping Derek from his own sibling? I looked at my son, standing with his back to me, his shoulders rigid with hurt and anger. This was the moment. I could either tell him everything now in front of Vanessa, letting her hear every detail of Vincent's complicated past, or I could hold back, try to salvage some control over the narrative. But looking at Derek's posture, the way he held himself apart from me, I realized that holding back any longer would only damage our relationship further. Your father's first marriage was troubled, I began slowly. His wife Sarah had severe mental health issues, untreated and unacknowledged. She was violent when she drank, which was frequently. Your father tried for years to get her help, to make the marriage work for the sake of their son. But one night things came to a breaking point. What happened? Derek turned to face me, his expression guarded. She attacked him with a knife during one of her episodes. He barely escaped with his life. He made a decision that night to leave, to start over somewhere new where she couldn't find him. He took what money he could access and disappeared. Changed his name, moved to California, eventually met me. He felt terrible guilt about leaving his son behind, but he was also terrified that if he tried to fight for custody, Sarah would have destroyed him in court. This was 1967, remember? Mental health wasn't understood the way it is now. Domestic violence against men wasn't taken seriously. So he just abandoned his kid? Derek's voice was hollow. He ran away and started a new life and never looked back? He looked back every day, I said firmly. He thought about Vincent Jr. constantly. He talked about him sometimes late at night when he couldn't sleep. But he was also afraid. Afraid that if he tried to make contact, he'd lead Sarah right to us, put our family in danger. She was unstable, Derek. Truly dangerous. And your father had built a good life, a safe life. He didn't want to risk that. Vincent Jr., Derek repeated slowly. My half-brother's name is Vincent Jr. What else do I not know? Where was he from? How old was he when Dad left? Is he even still alive? He would be in his late 60s now if he's alive, I said. He was 14 when your father left. They lived in a small town in Ohio, a place called Millfield. Your father's original name was Vincent Morgan. Vincent Morgan, Derek said the name like he was testing it, trying it on. My father was Vincent Morgan before he became Vincent Harrison. He had a whole other identity, a whole other life. And you've known this how long? I found out 5 years into our marriage, I admitted. A letter came addressed to Vincent Morgan. Your father broke down and told me everything. I made the choice to keep his secret to protect our family. And when he died, when there was no more reason to keep the secret, Vanessa pressed. You still said nothing? Because of this, I said, pulling the envelope from where I'd been keeping it tucked in my cardigan pocket. I'd started carrying it with me constantly, unwilling to leave it anywhere Vanessa might access it. Your father left a will. A second will, separate from the one that was probated. In it, he left half his estate to Vincent Jr. He wanted me to find him after his death and give him the inheritance he deserved, along with an explanation and an apology. The room went utterly silent. Derek stared at the envelope in my hands like it was a bomb. Vanessa's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, anger, and calculation. Half the estate, Derek said finally. You mean half of everything Dad left behind would have gone to this man I've never met? This brother I didn't know existed. And you just decided to ignore that will and keep everything for me? The accusation in his voice cut deep. It wasn't that simple, I said weakly. The will wasn't filed with the court. It was a personal document left in my care. I was supposed to make the decision about whether to honor it. And you decided not to, Vanessa stated flatly. You decided to keep your son's inheritance intact rather than following your husband's wishes. I was protecting Derek, I insisted. He just lost his father. He was devastated. And I was angry at Vincent for putting me in that position, for leaving me to clean up the mess of his past. I told myself I'd deal with it later, find Vincent Jr. eventually, but then time just kept passing and it became harder and harder to know how to make it right. So for 6 years you've been sitting on a substantial inheritance that rightfully belongs to someone else? Vanessa's voice dripped with moral superiority. You've been living in this house, spending money that should have been split with Derek's half-brother, all while lecturing me about doing what's right? The hypocrisy of her outrage would have been funny if the situation weren't so awful. This from the woman who'd been scheming to take my house and have me declared incompetent. But I couldn't say that without making things worse with Derek. Mom, Derek's voice was very quiet, very controlled. I need you to be completely honest with me right now. Is there anything else? Any other secrets? Any other relatives? Any other hidden documents or wills or debts or obligations? Anything at all that I don't know about our family? No, I said firmly. This is everything. Your father had one previous marriage, one son from that marriage, and one wish that I failed to honor. That's the whole truth. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he held out his hand. I need to see it. The envelope, the will, all of it. No more secrets, Mom. No more you deciding what I can and can't handle. With trembling fingers, I handed over the envelope. Derek took it carefully, almost reverently, and sat back down on the sofa. Vanessa immediately leaned in to read over his shoulder, her proximity to him and the papers feeling like a violation, but I was in no position to object. I watched my son's face as he read his father's words, saw the emotions play across his features. Shock, hurt, understanding, more hurt. When he got to the photograph, he stared at it for a long time, his thumb tracing the image of the teenage boy who shared his blood. He looks like me, Derek said finally, or like how Dad looked in old photos. Same eyes, same mouth. This is really my brother. Half-brother, Vanessa corrected absently, her attention focused on the legal document. This will is properly executed. Notarized, witnessed. It would have held up in probate court if it had been filed. But it wasn't filed, Derek said, looking up at me. You chose not to file it. You chose to let me believe I was Dad's only heir, to keep everything for me. For us, I corrected gently. I kept it for our family. For you, yes, but also because I didn't know what finding Vincent Jr. would mean. What he might do if he found out about the money. Whether he might challenge everything, drag us through courts, create chaos in your life when you were already struggling with grief. So you were protecting yourself too, Vanessa observed. Not just Derek. You were protecting your own position, your access to this house and Vincent's life insurance and everything else. Of course I snapped, my patience finally exhausted. I'm human, Vanessa. I made a choice based on fear and love and anger and practicality. It wasn't heroic, but it wasn't purely selfish either. I've been living with the guilt of that choice for 6 years, wondering if I did the right thing, knowing I probably didn't but unable to see a clear path forward. Well, now you have to see a path forward, Derek said firmly. Because I can't unknow this, Mom. I can't just pretend I don't have a brother out there somewhere. And I can't in good conscience keep an inheritance that Dad specifically wanted split with him. Derek, be reasonable, Vanessa started, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. No, Vanessa. This isn't about money or property or what's convenient. This is about doing what's right. My father wanted his first son to have half of what he left behind. That money, that house equity, all of it half belongs to Vincent Jr. And I'm going to make sure he gets it. But you don't even know if he's alive, Vanessa protested. He could be dead, in which case the money would go to his heirs, if he had any, and those could be complete strangers who descend on us with lawyers and demands. Then we'll deal with that if and when it happens, Derek said firmly. But first we're going to try to find him. See if he's alive, willing to be found, interested in connecting. And regardless of what he wants in terms of a relationship, he's going to get what Dad wanted him to have. He stood, the envelope still in his hands. I need some time to process all this. I'm going to take a drive, clear my head. When I get back, we're going to sit down and make a plan. A real plan with timelines and action items and complete honesty from everyone involved. His gaze landed heavily on me. No more secrets, Mom. That ends today. After he left, Vanessa and I sat in hostile silence. She was the first to speak, her voice cold and precise. You realize you've just cost Derek millions of dollars. Half of this house, half of Vincent's life insurance, half of everything. All because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. He would have found out eventually, I said tiredly. And it's better he heard it from me than discovered it some other way. Is it though? She tilted her head, studying me like a specimen under glass. Because from where I'm sitting, you just destroyed your relationship with your son. He'll never trust you again. He'll always wonder what else you might be hiding. What other truths you've bent to suit your own purposes. Her words hit their mark because they echoed my own fears. But I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing how deeply they cut. Derek loves me, I said with more confidence than I felt. He's angry now, and he has every right to be. But he'll understand eventually that I was trying to do what I thought was best. Will he? Vanessa smiled that cold smile. Or will he just see a woman who kept him from his only sibling, who stole an inheritance that wasn't hers to steal, who lied by omission for years? You've painted yourself as the villain in this story, Margaret. And there's no going back from that. She stood, smoothing her expensive yoga pants. I'm going to start dinner. Derek will need a good meal when he gets back. And clearly you're in no state to be helpful. She paused at the doorway. Oh, and Margaret? You should probably start thinking about those elder care facilities we discussed. Because after today, I don't think Derek's going to be quite so resistant to the idea of you living somewhere with professional supervision. After all, if you've been lying about something this important, who knows what other poor decisions you might be making. After she left, I sat alone in the darkening living room, the weight of what had just happened settling over me like a heavy blanket. I'd done what I'd sworn to avoid. I'd told Derek the truth in the worst possible way, under the worst possible circumstances, with Vanessa there to witness every moment and fan the flames of his hurt and anger. But what choice had I really had? The alternative was to keep lying, keep hiding, keep waiting for a perfect moment that would never come. At least now the truth was out. Derek knew about his brother. And despite Vanessa's poisonous predictions, I had to believe that my son's fundamental decency would guide him toward doing the right thing. The real question was what would happen once Vincent Jr. was found, if he was found. Would he be angry about the years of delayed inheritance? Would he want a relationship with Derek? Or would he resent his half-brother for the life their father had built with a second family? And what would it mean for me when Derek's attention turned to building a relationship with this long-lost relative? I pulled myself up using my walker, my hip protesting the stress of the emotional afternoon. The small guest room that had become my prison felt even more confining than usual. I lay down on the bed staring at the ceiling and wondered how I'd gotten here. How the woman who'd once run a household, raised a son, tended a beautiful garden, and managed a full social life had been reduced to this. Isolated in a tiny room while strangers controlled her home and her relationship with her only child splintered under the weight of long-buried secrets. Somewhere in the house, Vanessa was probably already on the phone with her lawyer friends, investigating whether this revelation gave her additional leverage to have me removed from the property. And Derek was driving around somewhere, processing the fact that his entire understanding of his family had been a carefully maintained fiction. The envelope was gone, my last piece of leverage turned over to Derek. I had nothing left to bargain with, no more secrets to deploy as weapons. I was completely vulnerable now, dependent on my son's mercy and facing a daughter-in-law who'd just been handed the perfect ammunition to use against me. As night fell and Derek still hadn't returned, I finally allowed myself to cry quiet tears of regret and fear and exhaustion soaking into the pillow that smelled faintly of someone else's detergent, in a room that would never feel like home, in a house that was slowly but surely slipping from my grasp. Derek didn't come home that night. He texted around 10 to say he'd checked into a hotel, needed space to think. The message was brief, devoid of his usual warmth, and it terrified me more than any of Vanessa's threats had. I'd broken something fundamental between us, and I had no idea how to repair it. Morning came with unexpected developments. I was sitting in my small room, picking at the breakfast Maria had quietly delivered, when I heard raised voices from upstairs. Derek had returned, and he wasn't alone. Through the floor I could hear multiple voices, his agitated, Vanessa's defensive, and a third I didn't recognize. 20 minutes later, Derek appeared at my door with a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mom, this is Catherine Wells. She's a private investigator who specializes in finding people. I've hired her to locate Vincent Jr. "Already?" I managed, surprised by how quickly he'd moved. "I spent last night researching everything I could find about Dad's past, about Millfield, Ohio, about the Morgan family. Catherine came highly recommended for this kind of work." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "I'm still angry, Mom. I'm still hurt. But I also understand that you were in an impossible situation. Dad put you there, and you did what you thought was right, even if I don't agree with your choices." The olive branch was small but genuine. "Thank you for understanding," I said quietly. Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice warm and professional. "Mrs. Harrison, I'll need any information you can provide about Vincent Jr. Dates, locations, names of relatives or friends. Anything that might help me track him down." Over the next hour, I told her everything I remembered from Vincent's stories. The small Ohio town, the troubled marriage, the knife attack that had prompted his flight. Catherine took notes, asked clarifying questions, and assured us she'd begin the search immediately. After she left, Derek lingered in the doorway. "Vanessa thinks I'm making a mistake. She says we should have the will evaluated by lawyers, look for loopholes that might invalidate it. She's worried about our financial future." "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think Dad wanted to make amends for abandoning his first son. And I think honoring that wish is more important than protecting money I never knew I wasn't entirely entitled to." He met my eyes directly. "I also think you should have told me this years ago, but I'm trying to understand why you didn't." The fact that he was trying meant everything. We sat in silence for a moment, not comfortable but not entirely hostile either. Then Derek did something unexpected. He sat down on the edge of my bed, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his face. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you keep this secret because you were actually trying to protect me, or were you trying to protect yourself and your position in this house?" The question struck at the heart of my guilt. "Both," I admitted. "I was scared of losing you, scared of someone else having a claim on your loyalty and affection. I was also angry at your father for leaving me to handle his mess. And yes, I was worried about money, about security, about what my life would look like if half the estate went to a stranger. It wasn't noble, Derek. It was human and flawed and selfish in some ways, but it was also rooted in love for you." He nodded slowly, processing. "That's what I needed to hear. Not excuses, just truth." He stood, moving toward the door. "Catherine says it might take a few weeks to locate Vincent Jr., if he's even findable. In the meantime, I've made some other decisions." "Oh." Apprehension tightened in my chest. "Vanessa and I are moving out. We found a condo downtown, closer to the hospital. We'll be out by the end of the week." The relief was so intense it nearly knocked the breath from me. But I kept my voice neutral. "That's probably for the best. You two need your own space. The house stays yours, Mom. Your name is on the deed, and it's going to stay that way. Whatever settlement I eventually work out with Vincent Jr. will come from other assets, not from taking your home." He paused. "But I do think you should consider hiring some help. Someone to assist with maintenance, maybe a part-time nurse to help with your physical therapy. You can't manage this place entirely alone." "I can manage just fine," I started, but he held up a hand. "Mom, please. Let me help you in ways that actually help, not in ways that take over your life. Keep your independence, keep your home, but accept that you need support. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said softly. "I can do that." After he left, I sat absorbing the shift. Vanessa would be gone. The house would remain mine. Derek was hurt but trying to understand. It wasn't perfect, but it was so much better than I'd dared hope just yesterday. The week that followed was a flurry of activity. Vanessa packed with grim efficiency, her coldness toward me absolute. She didn't say goodbye when they finally moved out, just swept past me in the hallway without a glance, as if I'd already ceased to exist in her world. Derek was different. He came back daily to check on me, to help arrange for the services I'd agreed to accept. His manner was careful, slightly distant, but not unkind. We were rebuilding trust slowly, one careful conversation at a time. Catherine called 3 weeks after beginning her search. Mrs. Harrison? I found him. Vincent Morgan Jr. is alive and living in Columbus, Ohio. He's a retired high school teacher, widowed, with 2 grown children of his own. I spoke with him briefly, told him someone from his father's past was trying to make contact. He was surprised but willing to hear more. My hand shook as I held the phone. What did you tell him? Nothing specific yet. I thought that conversation should come from family. She paused. He did say one thing though. He said he'd always wondered what happened to his father, whether he was alive or dead. He never stopped hoping for some kind of contact. The guilt hit fresh and sharp. 50 years he'd wondered. 50 years Vincent could have made some kind of peace with his first son but hadn't because of fear and shame. And I'd added 6 more years to that absence. 6 years Vincent Jr. could have known his father hadn't completely forgotten him. Derek was with me when we made the call. We sat in the living room, my living room once again now that Vanessa's sterile furniture was gone, and dialed the number Catherine had provided. The phone rang 3 times before a man's voice answered, cautious and deep. Hello? Mr. Morgan? This is Derek Harrison. I'm calling because I believe we're half-brothers. Your father was my father too. Silence stretched across the line. Then quietly, Vincent. No, sir. Vincent was my father's name as well, but I'm Derek. Our father passed away 6 years ago. But before he died, he left instructions for me to find you, to tell you the truth about why he left, and to give you what he wanted you to have. The conversation that followed was halting, emotional, filled with questions and careful revelations. Vincent Jr., who went by Victor now, had spent his life believing his father simply abandoned the family, disappeared without explanation or care. Learning that Vincent Sr. had been fleeing violence, that he'd thought about his first son constantly, that he'd wanted to make amends, changed something fundamental in Victor's understanding of his own history. They talked for over an hour. I listened, occasionally adding details that Derek didn't know, filling in pieces of Vincent's story. By the end, they'd agreed to meet. Victor would fly to Seattle, stay for a week, get to know the brother he'd never known existed. After the call ended, Derek sat quietly for a long moment. Then he reached over and took my hand, the first truly warm contact we'd had since the revelation. Thank you, Mom, for finally telling me the truth, for helping make this possible even though it was hard. I'm sorry it took me so long, I said, tears slipping down my cheeks. I'm sorry I let fear keep me from doing what was right. Victor arrived 2 weeks later. The resemblance to Vincent was startling, like seeing my late husband at an age he'd never reached. The reunion between the brothers was tentative at first, 2 men who shared blood but not history, trying to build a bridge across decades of separation. Over that week I watched them discover each other. They had the same laugh, the same way of rubbing their temples when thinking hard. They both loved baseball, both had become teachers in different ways, both carried their father's features and mannerisms like genetic echoes across time. The discussion about the inheritance happened on Victor's last day. Derek had worked out a settlement with his lawyers, a fair division that honored Vincent's wishes without bankrupting his own future. Victor was overwhelmed, insisting it was too much, that he'd never expected anything. But Derek was firm. This is what Dad wanted. This is what's right. After Victor left, promising to return with his own children to meet their newfound uncle, Derek and I sat in the garden I was slowly reclaiming. The roses needed work, but they'd survived my neglect, just as my relationship with my son had survived the revelation of my failures. I learned something through all this, Derek said, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. About forgiveness, about family, about how complicated love can be. What did you learn? I asked. That people make mistakes, even people we love, even people who love us. Dad made mistakes with Victor. You made mistakes keeping his secrets. Vanessa made mistakes thinking she could force her way into our family. He turned to look at me. But mistakes don't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes they're just the messy middle part, the part where people figure out how to be better. His words felt like absolution, like permission to forgive myself for the choices I'd made out of fear and love and confusion. We sat together as darkness fell, mother and son, no longer separated by secrets, finally just 2 people trying their best to honor the past while building something better for the future. The house was mine again, truly mine. But more importantly, my son was mine again too, not in the possessive way that had made me hide truths to keep him close, but in the honest way that came from surviving something hard together and coming out the other side with deeper understanding. Vanessa sent divorce papers 6 months later. Derek signed them without contest, acknowledging what everyone else had seen from the beginning, that their marriage had been built on ambition and convenience, rather than genuine connection. He dated casually after that, but focused mostly on building his relationship with Victor and Victor's children, on becoming the family Vincent Sr. had never managed to give his first son. As for me, I hired help as Derek suggested, but I kept my independence in my garden and my home. The envelope was gone, its secrets finally freed from their hiding place beneath the mattress, but I didn't miss it. Some burdens are meant to be carried alone, but others are meant to be shared, and learning the difference was perhaps the hardest lesson of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.